Hello, Emily Miller.
Hi, Kate Richburg. How are you?
Hello. Hello. There we go. Let me stand back a little bit so I'm not like a super close talker. There we go. Excellent. It's great to have you on. Welcome, everybody, to Free Tip Friday.
It's really
It
good to
is,
see you, Kate.
it's good to see you.
You know,
It
I
is.
didn't bring any extra screens with me, so I have no idea what's going on Facebook or YouTube right now.
I've got you, and
Right?
I will put up some. You have so many hellos already. So we are live. It is Friday, September 23rd. We have just celebrated the fall equinox in our northern hemisphere. So, as social media likes to say, it's fall, y'all. And uh, Emily has no pumpkin spice in her seed beads today, but you are working with something that's orange.
I,
So
I chose orange. It's one of my my go-to neutrals, but I chose it because I thought it showed up well on camera.
yeah, it does. It does. And I
Mm.
love that it's one of your go-to neutrals. Speaking of, I'm going to land the plane on the story in just a second, but some once in a while I have to circle. So the orange reminds me of that fantastic project that you did at our bead retreat. Emily and I yesterday talked looms for the loom project that she's going to show. And we have a bunch of retreaters watching.
Hi,
We've got
guys.
Rose. I'm putting Rose. Miss you guys so much. We miss you too, Rose.
Oh, Rose, I hope you're doing well.
Rose.
Your creativity is blooming still.
Yes, she's queen of the wrap bracelet, that Rose. We've
Yeah.
got Jan Allen, my sister in pearl love and vintage jewelry. And we've got, let me see if we've got some former retreaters. There's Kim.
Oh,
Hey to Kim.
hey, Kim.
We've got someone who was watching for the first time. Kathleen, it's your first time watching live. I hope we don't drive you away. Because Fridays, especially with Emily and I, can get a little,
Kate and I checked in had a phone call yesterday for a quick check-in, which was an hour and a half.
Yeah, quick. Just
Yeah.
real quick, Em. I need to check a few things
Yeah.
because we usually check in on Thursdays. Just real quick for an hour and a half. It is so true. And Janice is over on our YouTube channel saying hello. And oh, good. We've got Vonda. This is her first time. Welcome
Hi,
to
Vonda.
you, Vonda. So I'm just scrolling through everybody. Everybody. And Lorraine, thank you. That Friday is fun. Thank goodness, because we, get sometimes a little crazy. And Rose said she is well and she's beating like crazy. So that's great.
Yay.
Yay.
Good. Excellent.
Well, Emily and I cannot wait to invite you guys along with Janice this year to the bead retreat for next year.
Yes.
We have the dates are locked and loaded, you guys. So you can put it on your calendars. We're going to open up registration probably around the new year for that, but it's going to be starting on Friday, August 18th of 2023. And then we're going to leave. We've got a little bit of extra time. We're going to leave Monday afternoon on the 21st of August.
Maybe we get back to going to Picard's.
Yeah, that would be fun. It would be fun to go back to going to the Bead Museum or, doing kind of a Monday kind of a thing. It would be fun. Yeah, it would be good time. So
I love the Bead Museum, and I think it's a treasure. And
yeah.
if you're out there in that area, we're not that far from it, and you don't have to be there all day, but it's really an inspiration to walk around and look at.
Yeah, it's so fun. And you can go to the Picard Bead Museum online and kind of see what they're all about. They've published some books on vintage beads, vintage trade beads, vintage Czech glass beads. I'm in a vintage jewelry group on Facebook. What a surprise. And there's a lot of people on there that know about like vintage rhinestone jewelry and stuff, but don't know a lot about dating the beads that are in those. So people kind of once in a while, I'll get a PM in my box going, "Hey, what's this?" And I'm like, "Oh, let me consult my books." So it's kind of fun. Janice is saying about the Bead Museum, and it's great advice. She says the Bead Museum is called Picard Bead Museum, but call ahead for reservations
Mhm.
because we're not really sure if they're open still from the pandemic or not. But you can contact them on your own.
I think even pre-pandemic, they like to know you were planning to come
Yeah,
because
definitely. It's not something where you can just kind of drop in and go, "Hey, I'm here,"
yeah.
but it's definitely worth a trip
And they have a
out
small
there.
museum shop too.
Yes, they do have such beautiful things, and I'm seeing maybe you've got some. I'm squinting behind you. You've got some things back there that may have been from.
Yeah, up here is kind of
Yeah,
my trade bead rack
yeah,
right at the
they're
moment. I
beautiful.
After we moved, I didn't have the same kind of display spot that I had before, so it's still in development. And then
Yeah,
on this side is another rack of odds and ends.
nice, nice
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I've got a few of those over here. Well, you are going to share. You're going to drop some knowledge on all of us today, and I think that that's like one of my favorite. Uh, Emily times is when you just when she's doing that, taking off her glasses. When she waxes poetic about a bead, um, a deep dive into a bead subject. So um, we're going to talk about seed beads today, but I'm going to ask you a question, Emily, and I don't know if I know the answer to this. So I'm going to ask you, was your first love seed beading or was it a different type of beading?
I got into beading because I was getting married and I had some pearls that were temporarily strung.
Oh,
And I went and had them it was a long strand and I had them broken down into a necklace and a couple of bracelets for my maid of honor and bride flower girl. And it was expensive. I mean, it was like I think they were
yeah.
charging like $1.25 a knot. And then
Yeah, and that was cheap
say how
then.
many beads, how many knots it was going to be. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, gosh, and I come from a very crafty at home family, who would say,
Mhm.
it's kind of expensive. We can make that.
Yes.
And I know you come from that same family, which is why Kate and I bond over so many things.
Yeah, so many make, do, and
So
mend.
I had a friend where I was working, and she said, there's this bead store, and I said, bead store, what's that? And she said, well, yeah, it's up on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley, and you should check it out. And so after work one day, I dropped in, and I remember walking in and thinking, oh, it's like a fabric store. You
But
go in,
beads.
you buy the stuff, and then you take it home and you make something out of it. And so I started dropping into this bead store, a couple times a week. And pretty soon I had to pay cash because I couldn't have those checks keep showing up in the checkbook. And I'd walk out with a little paper bag that was like $40. And I'm thinking, like, $40 in beads. So this is like 1991,
Right.
91.
Checkbook days.
You wrote a check, right? And they
That's
accepted
right.
it. And so when you turn up at the bead store on the regular for a couple of weeks, the owner comes over and says, hey, who are you? What's your name? What are you doing? And
Right.
it turned out that the owner and I were about the same age and we had some similar things in common. And pretty soon we were hanging out and doing things together and going to bead shows. And long story short, 4 or 5 years later, I was teaching there and running the class scheduling. And I did that class scheduling for 14 years. It was a
Yeah,
really, I don't know if I was the first person to sort of be a class director like that, but it was uncharted territory. I was making it up as I went along. And Kate and I were
that's
just
right.
talking about classes and kind of being in control of what you did. You did
Yeah.
what you needed. And seed beads came along to me pretty soon after that because there was a big trend those days for bead weaving with seed beads. So you were making amulet bags, and
I was gonna say amulet purse bags.
I
That's
meant to
right.
find my very first amulet bag because I wore it to a bead show and I was so proud of myself and it was tiny. And then I saw someone there wearing one that was like the size of a deck of cards, and I was like, oh, I feel so small. But I found that these little beads were really intriguing in a lot of ways. I mean, it was I'm not a pattern follower. I can do it with sewing patterns, but
Mhm.
knitting patterns, beading patterns, I don't buy kits because I just buy them and then they never make them.
Mhm, they languish.
They languish. I mean, I have kits in my work in progress box that, are 12 years old that I have never touched. I bought all
Yeah,
the supplies and it's just not my bag. But I do love working with the seed beads. I think that they're pleasurable to look at, they're pleasurable to handle. There's so many colors. It's like an unlimited paint box.
yeah,
And they have a really rich history, and I really enjoy that history as well.
yeah,
I enjoy finding out about, and I think it's why I like trade beads so much too, is that they are like a little tiny piece of history. You can have a piece of a Roman glass bead in your hand that's, you know,
thousands of years
years
old.
old
Yeah,
and been
it's
through
I agree.
many, many, many owners, and it has just a life and a story all its own, and it's a little
Yeah,
piece of art. So I do find all those parts of beading really intriguing,
yeah.
and I'm slowly getting into the lapidary side of things, the stones more, knowing more about gem and gemology, which maybe Kate and I'll take an online gemology class and get our GIA certifications together.
Right, totally. Because we have nothing else to do, but maybe, we'll,
It's one
we'll
of
put
those
that
things.
on the 10-year list. Perfect,
A list,
perfect.
right? You can do that with me. We can study
Right,
together. That's
totally.
great.
I've got a list here somewhere that I'll just add it to it.
Can we just
That'll
put it
be
on the
good.
whiteboard at the top?
Yeah, perfect. I actually my list is sitting over there, and it's, the list is like 3 months out of date, but, whatever. So with the seed bead work, and one of the things that I did wanna mention is, here at Bead Shop, we sell mostly Japanese seed beads,
Right.
which you're gonna talk about today, but you're also gonna share some other, I believe, right, some other beads that you have in your collection. The
Yep.
thing about selling beads online, the way it differs from when, back in the day when Emily and I wrote checks, uh, to bead stores, right? Or had an employee deduction from our paychecks. Yeah, that started happening.
Will work for me.
Um, right, will work for beads. Um, and so when we were buying beads live and we were doing like more boutique shows and stuff like that, you were able to find like old Czech seed beads, size 15s, ones that they'd call Charlottes, beads that were just, even French seed beads, vintage, a lot of that kind of stuff. So those are a little farther and fewer between than they used to be. So my piece of advice is, if you are a seed bead lover, of course, shop all of our fantastically curated seed beads here at Bead Shop, but also keep your eyes open for your favorites or for a color that you may love because I just got Emily some old seed beads when we saw our African trader. I did a little personal shopping and bought some for Emily, but it was a color that I sometimes see with the traders in Tucson, right? And I'm like, oh, I need to get that color, and I'm not going to use those seed beads. I better send them to Emily. So I bought all that I could get, right? Because that seed bead now is,
Yeah, the hoarding instinct comes into play really hard with seed beads.
Mhm,
That's,
mhm,
you know, storage is a question that you have to kind of an inventory. I don't keep an inventory any longer. I used to.
mhm.
Computerized inventory on my Palm Pilot.
Nice, nice.
Throwback. Throwback.
Right, throwback. We're just Palm Pilot. We're just throwing it back today. Well, Emily, I'm going to go ahead and feature your workspace
Sure.
here. I'm going to solo layout that, and
Okay.
I'm going to let you start throwing down some knowledge here.
Since we started off talking about old beads, I have a little box of treasures here that I thought I would show. And, you know, um, you can learn a lot from old things. And so if you see something that's beaded that's old that you might see at a yard sale or an antique shop or a thrift
Mhm.
store or whatever, I think it's
And it's not
interesting.
it's not in It's not in frame, Em?
No, not yet. I know. I'm bringing it over.
Okay,
Bringing it over.
I'm just making sure.
This is a piece of loom weaving
Wow.
that I got at a antique show, um, and it's made with what are called satin beads, which
Yeah.
you look at them very carefully. They kind of have a satiny finish to them, so it looks very glossy
Mhm.
when you look at it. And it's absolutely loom woven, and the ends were taped down, but you can see the warp kind of woven in, and it's a very pretty classic Native American.
It really is beautiful, and that color palette is gorgeous.
Isn't that pretty? I love it. I think it's really great. I mean, this is, I think,
Mhm.
supposed to be a teepee, and
Mhm.
these are maybe flowers or snowflakes, and I think that's a pipe, maybe
Mhm.
an
Yeah, and an
arrow,
arrow.
and
Yeah, it's cool.
it's really cool. So that's kind of a fun one.
Mhm.
And then this is also really beautiful. This was actually a handbag that probably didn't get finished, but you know what? These are the same satin glass beads that are in that other piece.
Yeah.
It's netted, right? But mostly round beads, some satin glass, all one size here. This is pretty much a size 11 bead, but there's
Mhm.
some real pretty ones in there, and it's damaged, so it's not functional. It could be repaired, but
Mhm.
and then a real treasure, which you will see these, and they're not terribly rare, but the more complex ones and the more beautiful ones.
Yes,
Um,
I have one that's socked away.
This is actually a purse. You can see the clasp at the top, and it's made out of what are called steel cut beads. So these are actually metal beads, and they will rust if you're not careful. They have to be kept very dry.
Mhm.
It's incredibly weighty, but it's also loom woven in two pieces, one piece, sorry, and then folded in half. And there's the seam
Mhm.
on the side and seamed together. Really beautiful little fringe hanging down. Even broken, these are worth purchasing because you can actually reuse the beads.
Mhm.
The lining inside is just about had it, but at one point I think it was pink silk. And even these frames to make this style purse are still really available. They're really,
Mhm, they are.
you can
Yeah.
actually find quite a bit. And I have one last piece that I will show really quickly. This was a piece that I meant to bring to the retreat, and I actually couldn't locate it at 0 hour. But this is a split loom necklace. So it's made on a loom. So here's the pendant portion in the middle, and then
Mhm.
it splits apart to make the necklace, which is very pretty. Again, this is about a size 11 bead, which is a very common, probably our most common size bead that we work with. But I can tell that these are older beads, and I can tell them because of the quality and the evenness of the beads. So I'm going to
Mhm.
try and hold this real still so that you can see in the white beads. Where's my pointer? You can see that the size of these beads varies quite a bit, right?
Right.
And what that does to the width of your piece is it makes it kind of wow in and out. And even
Mhm.
these two sides side by side are different in shape and size. It's pretty obvious when you look real carefully, right? On your neck might not be so apparent, but that unevenness is kind of a hallmark of an older bead.
Especially since those beads were, handmade seed beads were much more handmade.
Right.
Now the Japanese beads are machine ma they're
Right.
it's an automated process. Emily, put it really close to the as you were putting it away, it came up kinda high to the camera. Would
Okay.
you just put that right back kind of tall? Bring that up just a little bit? There we go. We can really see kind of where that warp is. And can you guys see like that color? What Emily's talking about, the color of the glass and stuff. It's just so, it's because the glass was just made differently then.
This
Really,
yellow, this mustardy yellow with
really
the blue
beautiful.
together is just super dynamic. Um, when you pick colors that are further apart on the color wheel, you
Mhm,
get more dynamism out of your pieces. It's much
mhm.
more um, vibrating to have those two colors side by side.
Yeah, they look great, and look at how that diamond, the blue and white diamond, how it kind of it comes together, and repeats, the pattern then on the straps. It's really great.
It's super
It's
interesting. Every time I look at this piece, I notice something different.
yeah,
So
it's a cool
beads,
piece.
look at the beads in the middle of this diamond.
Mhm.
So the artist actually chose some slightly bigger ones to run in that middle. So loom, of course, is back and forth, right?
Mhm.
So she actually chose, or he chose some of these bigger beads and had them land in the center of this diamond,
Right.
right?
It's really a cool piece, really cool.
So glass seed beads, um, and seed bead is a generic name that we use for all of these smaller beads. I've just mixed my beads accidentally there, but these seed beads are glass. They are made generally in a way of extruding the glass. So this is think of a clay machine that's like a kid would use with Play-Doh that pushes the clay out, and it comes out in little tubes, or it comes out in little strings like spaghetti is made or macaroni is made. The glass is then cut. Um, it is tumbled to soften the edges and make everything shiny and smooth. And then they'll be sorted by size and then either packaged in a tube or in a hank of beads. The older the beads were made in the Czech Republic and made in France and a little bit in Italy, were all hanked. They were all sewn onto or threaded onto a strand of beads and then bundled in groups of about a dozen or sometimes a little bit more uh,
Mhm.
to put them together for sale. So that's how that would
Right.
be done.
And
This
it's usually standardized, as you say, by a dozen strands. So when we
sure,
would buy them, we'd know, like patterns used to be written, you need X number of hanks
right, right.
of seed beads, and that would be a measurement. You have a couple of questions before we get
Sure.
too far, Em,
Yeah.
and then I'll have you keep going.
Okay.
Um, there's people are loving these old pieces that you've shared. Lynn has a question about what type of thread would have been on those loomed pieces.
So
Um, um,
before the invention of polyester or artificial threads, it was cotton thread primarily.
mhm,
Most of the silk purses or the bead purses would have been made on what was called purse silk, so a
mhm,
thin silk thread.
mhm,
But natural materials, cotton and silk were the most common product available. There was no polyester or nylon threads. So
mhm,
as the thread ages and deteriorates, these pieces, if they're not kept in a very nice environment, are going to age and deteriorate as well.
mhm. Okay, great. So, so we've looked at the hanks. So what's next on your? Oh, and people, someone is asking. Carla said, "Where did you get that cool little white board that you have everything on?"
I just started playing around a little bit with watercoloring. It's actually a watercolor palette. So I would do a little Google search. You can check on Amazon. They're kind of around. It's actually porcelain, which is nice because it's a little heavy. So it's not going to move too quickly. I probably wouldn't use this for beading. It's great for organizing and kind of showing off what we're working with. But
Mhm,
in my work, the way I tend to work, I don't usually work in a dish like this. I find it
mhm,
too hard to capture the beads. But it
mhm.
is
But
great for
it is,
organizing.
yeah, and it's nice to color palette too.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
Kate talked a little bit earlier about a Charlotte bead. This is about a 13 size
Oh,
Charlotte.
great. Can you raise them even a little tight? Yeah, there we go, Em.
So you can actually see that these have a really pretty kind
Those
of subtle
facets.
sparkle.
Yeah.
That means they have one facet, one flat side ground on the bead, right?
Mhm.
And that's a hank. And they would put together, I believe, 12 hanks to be a mass.
Mhm.
So it was a big bundle for a wholesaler.
Mhm.
And then most retail people would buy them in this hank size.
Mhm.
So this starts to bring in the talk about sizing. Um, there are common sizes today. Size 15 is about the smallest, then 11. Then you might encounter some 10s and 12s occasionally, mostly in Czech beads. Then size 11, size 8, size 6, and actually down to a 2 or a 3, which begins to be
Mhm.
a big enough bead that we don't even really recognize it so much as a seed bead.
Right. We've called those in the past, like the size 6, we'd call an E bead.
Right. Or a pony bead.
Or a pony bead.
Right.
Sometimes we'd call the 2s or
So
even the 32-aughts.
in the old days, you could actually get size 20 beads.
20s. I was going to say those are 19s, but holy cow.
So this is like dirt with a hole in it.
Yeah.
And really, this wasn't meant for looming or weaving. It would have been strung one time and then made into a handbag, knitted probably into a handbag. So knitted handbags, when you see a beaded handbag, mostly they're loomed or knitted. Those are the kind of common ones.
Right. And knitted on very fine, like size 0 needles, those steel needles, really small.
So this is a size 18 bead.
Wow.
Super tiny. I didn't really buy those to do anything with. I bought them just to collect.
Right, to have them.
The way the sizing came about is it was really done with how many beads laid out in hole with the holes up would fit in an inch. And so nowadays we don't really even talk about the measurement of a seed bead. We just use the number, and you'll see it a few different ways. It might be 11 with a little symbol that looks like a temperature, the little degree mark, or it'll be 11/0, or sometimes you might say it in your verb, you might say it aloud, 11/aughts. But generally, if you say, 11s or 15s or 8s or 6s, we kind of all are on the same plan.
Right, on the same beading page.
Yeah. So big differences also between the different sizes or the different shapes of beads. In the old days, there was really only one shape, and it was a round seed bead. Sometimes it's called a rocale. And really what that means is that it's just a plain tubular bead that looks kind of like a donut. I'm going to try and get nice and close here.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
That's a size 11 bead. It's one of our Picasso finish ones.
Yes, we love those Picassos.
Right next to it, I'm going to put a delica bead. So Japanese bead making has really changed how the beads look in their shape. So a round rocale bead versus a delica bead, and I'm going to grab an 8 delica because there you can really see it. So delica beads are like they cut a little slice from a pipe and then they kind of evened it out. And one of the cool things about delicas and all Japanese beads is that the size of the hole to the size of the bead itself, the hole is almost the whole bead. The walls of the bead are very, very thin. Now, let me grab a Czech bead, and this is a Czech size 6 bead, so it's easy to see. See how small that hole is? So Japanese beads make it easy to stitch through a bead multiple times with your needle and thread. Czech beads, if we get down to a Czech 11, that has a smaller hole, and it's also more bulbous shaped. So let me put those on the needle so you can kind of see them side by side, right?
Those look great.
Okay. So the difference really between modern and old glass beads is the shape on the outside, sort of donut versus more cylindrical, and then the hole size. Older glass beads have really, really small and irregular holes, so not so much fun to stitch through multiple times. If you're just stringing them on, not a big deal. If I'm doing crochet, I can use any bead I want. If you choose in some of your bead weaving stitches to mix Czech and Japanese, the problem's going to be that your bead weaving will move in and out along its edges. So most of the time when we're looming or peyote stitching, we're looking for those nice, clean, crisp edges on our beadwork. Not to have things be lumpy or irregular down the edges. There are ways to work with that, and we're going to get to that soon, I promise you, in classes. But most of the time, we're really looking at that hole size and then the outside shape. We want that nice, regular, even shape for our work, right? Here's a piece that I finished at the retreat, which I had a really good fun time with. And this is actually all Czech glass beads, and these are older ones. The color kind of tells me, and the material that the way they're made tells me that these are older. And you can see that that edge is very irregular because the beads themselves are not terribly even. Even though I
Yeah.
pulled as I went along, it's still not very even. Now, once you put that piece on, some of that irregularity is not so apparent and it may not disturb your eye, but it's nice to know in advance what that's going to look like, right?
Yeah, that's such a cool piece.
Check glass is a great glass to do embroidery with.
Mhm.
Great glass to do. I use them often when we're doing bead crochet. Doesn't matter if I have some little irregularities. Here's my pear from Pear Festival.
Yeah, it's that time of year.
It's actually this Saturday. It's coming right up. So bead embroidery, I'm not too worried that there's some little irregularities in these beads. It's not a problem, right? I don't need to worry that some are a little fatter, some are a little thinner. It's not going to make any difference. Other seed bead stitches like loom, peyote stitch, all those ones are going to make a little bit more of a difference. Even with brick stitch, here's the heart on your sleeve brick stitch. Even with brick stitch, because our beads stack on one another, those little irregularities will ultimately make a difference. And it kind of depends then again on what your colors are, how you've chosen your colors to work. Will it really show and make a difference to you? So if you're trying a new seed bead stitch with a new bead, I suggest that you make a sample. And I know JP is going to laugh when she sees this. She's going to say, "Oh my God, the jar is back."
The
So
jar is back.
when I sit down to do a project of weaving, bead weaving with seed beads, I tend to make a sample before I get started. And samples kind of are there to let me work out the stitch and maybe work out that pattern. Here's an aborted amulet bag. I went through about 10 rows and I never looked back.
Yeah, and you
Um,
said adios, amulet bag.
yes. Here's a little bit of peyote stitch, tubular peyote stitch. And it's actually using two different textures of beads. So matte and a not matte, a
So
shiny.
cool. My favorite stitch, tubular peyote.
I like tubular peyote too. It's got its ups and downs. Matte beads side by side have a little bit of a
A crunch.
gritchiness to them. It's
Yeah.
nails on the chalkboard, and
Yeah.
some people can't manage that. Some people like it okay, some people don't. It's your choice. But I throw things into my scrap bin here if they didn't really work out too well. So this
That's
is
a nice one.
this has its moments. I want you to look carefully at these beads near the clasp where they got a lot of wear.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wah,
Kate
wah.
knows what's happening here. The finish is actually wearing off.
Yeah.
So in the old days,
I was going to say back in the day.
and this is not all that old a piece, but
Yeah.
back in the day, there used to be much more problem with the finish rubbing off the beads. In fact, I remember maybe the very first pair of brick stitch earrings I ever made, which are probably in this jar somewhere. I made them with some gold beads. And I was so excited about them. And as I was finishing putting the fringe on, I looked further at the top of the thing and I said, "What are those little black dots on the
Yeah.
bead?"
The
And I
finish
rubbed, and the
is
black dots
coming
got
off
bigger.
already. Yeah.
I didn't even finish the pair. I didn't even get to wear them, let alone use them. The
Yeah.
gold was coming off. So
Yeah.
nowadays, most finishes on glass beads are pretty stable. There will be some ones that may not be perfect, and depending on what you're making, you may have to make a choice whether you have to have that color. So having the color wear down or wear off is not my choice, and I try not to personally work with those type of beads. Some beads are color lined, so they will have a color paint on the inside of the bead, and that can fade, but it tends to fade a little bit more uniformly. This is just mottled all over the place and is super unsatisfactory to me.
Yeah. But the
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 gold
shape,
beads are holding up good.
yeah, and the shape and the pattern of that piece, I like it a lot. It
Yeah,
has a really
this
nice
is a,
silhouette to it. So maybe we
yeah,
should actually do that,
yeah.
revisit that again. I
Oh,
I just love the silhouette of it because it would look great over mounted on some ultra suede.
Sure. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, people are saying they really like that piece a
Oh,
lot.
good. Good, I'm glad. I was gonna dig down a little, see if I could find those sad earrings, but it was
Yeah,
in this.
dig deep, dig
Yeah.
deep.
So back in the day also, and this is, I think, a common thought when you think about making something with seed beads, you say, I'm just gonna buy some cheap beads to practice with. Let me stop you right there.
Yeah, stop right there.
Stop right there. Don't buy cheap beads. Buy small quantities of a color that you like and work with those. Don't buy the most expensive bead because there are some pricey ones out there. But think about the fact that the quality of the bead is so much nicer if that hole is bigger and they're
Right.
more uniform. Inexpensive, really cheap beads are really a frustration to work with, and that's no fun.
No, and you guys really, if you take nothing away from today's broadcast, take those words to heart because Emily knows what she's talking about.
Oh
Some
yeah,
of you may hearken back to like maybe like the 70s when you got that bead loom, that Native American bead loom,
you're
and
reading
it
my mind.
right, and it came with a little vial of like Czech seed beads that
Vile
were
is the right word. Throw those away.
exactly VILE, not VIAL,
Yeah.
that you would loom with, and they were just horrid. So
Ugh.
use practice in the same quality. It doesn't have to be like seed beads. Some colors of glass are more expensive than others. You know, if they're gold plated or things are more expensive, or some colors, like I say, are more expensive. Just choose something maybe that's a little more on the lower end, and your results will be so much more satisfying.
And just so much easier to work with.
Right.
I'm not.
And repeatable.
And repeatable for sure. It translates one to one. Yes,
Mhm.
you are doing the same with that same
Right.
bead. So
Same. Yeah.
so I think it's a good idea to have a small kit that you might call your seed beading kit. And I know when we first started doing seed bead school, we recommended that you buy a few colors of beads and
Mhm.
a contrasting color of thread so that you could practice a stitch with the beads that were easy to see. And I think you can do that really simply with black and white beads. That's actually the wrong size. Let's switch that. Size 11, black and white seed beads, and then pick one more color. I think I chose a blue.
Yeah, we had the blue for a while.
Yeah,
Um,
you could choose a purple or a yellow or, whatever kind of color kind of makes you happy. Pick three colors.
mhm.
Obviously that was $1.69 for that vial. This was probably about the same. It was a ways back. And here's another tip, and I wish I had done this. I at one point invested in some expensive bead tubes to keep my beads in. I spent more money that I should have spent on beads on storage. My recommendation now, many years later, is to just keep the beads in the original tube where you bought them.
Yeah, I
Keep
agree
the
with that.
beads. Keep
One
them pure. You
100%.
you know how much it costs if you ever think you want to make something to sell, although I rarely sell seed bead stuff because I can't make any money at it. But it keeps everything kind of tidy in the sense of where you got it, what the name of it was, all those
Mhm.
things. You could write the year on there if you felt like it. But picking out 3 colors of beads to play around with, pick a contrasting thread color. Pick something that doesn't match. That
So
way,
you
when
can
you
really see it.
you can see your thread path. I've got a netted bead here, and it's interesting because we dyed these beads. This is one of our first
I
retreats.
remember, gosh, that was a fun live.
It's a
You can
really fun.
find that. And Janice just put it up, and I'm going to put it up one more time. Um, Seed Bead School. Emily has done a myriad of Seed Bead School broadcasts, and you can find them right under our learning. They're all kind of lumped together on one page for all of Emily's Seed Bead learning under Seed Bead School.
So 2 colors, black and white, but they're really dynamic. And I colored the bead underneath. So this is done
Yeah.
over a wooden bead. So there's a little bit of dark red poking through.
I
But
just
this
love
is
them.
this is just a great way to practice a stitch so that you have some working knowledge of what happens when I do one move or the other move. And it's super easy to see when you've made a mistake or you've put in a wrong color bead or anything like that. So just practice a little bit with black and white. It's perfectly fine, right?
Yeah, or another high contrast
Yeah,
color.
you could do
White.
black and white and red. You could do
Yeah.
red and white or red and green or any kind of color that shows off the differences between those beads.
Mm-hmm.
So the next little portion that I thought would be interesting to talk about would be needles and thread. Needles and thread are they're such a large topic to talk about. Really, what you're looking for is something that's durable and flexible when it comes to thread. I do like KO quite a bit. I
Mm-hmm.
have for years used Nymo, which is a similar product to this. That's actually a non-twisted thread. So this is a little bit more like dental floss. If we were to kind of rub this apart, it would come apart in sort of strands, multiple strands. It's quite a thin thread. It's quite strong. Has very little stretch to it. I also really like a thread that's really not available much anymore called Silamide, and it's one that
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with. Silamide is a twisted thread, so it's plied. It's a couple strands twisted together like yarn. It has a little bit more stretch to it, and I like having that little bit of extra stretch. When I first started doing bead weaving, I'll confess here to this weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
I was really concerned about pieces breaking and falling apart. And I thought, this is like, I can impact this. And I will double my thread through everything I do. So like you were sewing on a button on a shirt, you put your thread through the needle, bring it to the end, tie the knot at the end. And so you have two strands of thread.
Right.
So with bead weaving, most of the time you go through every bead more than once, maybe 3 or 4 times, depending on what your stitch you're doing. That meant I had a lot of thread in those holes, which meant my pieces were very stiff.
Mm-hmm.
I never had a problem with tension, and I never had a problem with breakage either. But I would like my things to feel flexible like fabric. And that's kind of what you're making when you're doing bead weaving, is you're making a fabric. And now I use singled thread. So I cut a piece of thread about 1.5 yards long, and I put my needle on it, and I bring one end about 3/4 of the way down. So then I have about 1/4 of that thread quantity for that's my working area. Eventually, I'll have to move that needle up and keep moving it until I run out of thread. If you double your thread all the time, your needle is wearing on that one spot, and you're likely to break your thread against the needle, not against any beads, but against
Right.
the needle itself. So KO is great. I will work with any bead thread that comes my way. And I do really like Fireline. So this is kind of a new material, and it's one of those places where you're exchanging strength for flexibility just a little bit. It's a little bit like the comparison of nylon thread to soft flex. Soft flex is super durable. It doesn't abrade. The beads can rub against it all it likes, and it won't wear out, doesn't stretch. So Fireline's a little bit like that. You have a very tough, almost break-proof strength, but it's a little bit wiry. It's not quite as flexible as our regular seed beading thread. I do like it a whole lot though, and I use it quite often.
Yeah,
Anytime I
you
do
use it
this,
a lot.
I'm
I
going to have
like
it.
it too.
Pardon?
I like it too. You
Yeah,
really turned me on to the Fireline. And just a note, we just um, launched the Fireline in the 50-yard spools.
right. I'm so glad to see the 50 yards because they're a little bit better in the price.
Yeah.
So whenever I use Fireline or any thread, I always have beeswax around. And you can see how this beeswax is kind of dirty looking. This Fireline was actually meant to go into a fishing reel and then through all the little guides on the fishing pole to be used for fishing. And it has a little bit of graphite dust on it. So you can actually sometimes have it come off on your finger. This spool has been kind of around the horn a little bit. So there's a little bit on my thumb. So it will come off on your beeswax. I've never really had much of a transfer problem, but if I'm using white thread and white beads or very light colored beads, have a second block of beeswax that's for that part, because this dirtiness probably would show up on white thread. And frankly, wash your hands a bunch, because you're going to have smudginess on your project, and you don't want to have that. It will look different from one end to the other, and white thread is sort of my least favorite. I will use it with lighter colors, but really a favorite thread for me is kind of anything in a dark earth tone, a dark gray, a dark mauve, a dark brown.
Yeah, because
Really
it kind of fades into the background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Most of the time when we're weaving with thread and needle, and beads, our goal is going to be to have the thread not show as much as possible. There are going to be times when the thread does show, and that's part of life. We can't really get around that. So we try and pick a thread where it shows the least,
Mm-hmm.
right? Needles are another fun topic because they are essential for bead weaving. There are a couple of sizes that are most common today, and that will get you through almost every situation that you could come across. Size 10 and size 12. I go back and forth a little bit on these. Size 10 needle is big. It's bigger than a 12. The eye
Mm-hmm.
is bigger. It's easier to thread. But if you're using round rocal beads, there may be a time where your size 10 needle and the thread that's in the beads make it not easy to pass that needle through again. So I mostly use 12s nowadays. And I've got a
Mm-hmm.
10 laid out here on my surface, and I'm going to pull out a 12. And
I'm a 10 fan, as you guys know.
sorry, you're a 10 fan?
You know me. I
You
like a 10.
can you can get away with 10s for most of your beading. I don't ever have to worry about changing a needle if I have my 12s.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And
here's
remind me, I have a fire line question when you're done with the
okay.
needles.
Here's a 10 and here's a 12 side by side. Let me put my hand behind. Actually, let me get a piece of paper. Hold on. Hold that thought.
Hold that thought.
I got to reach way over here. Hold on. For just a piece of nice, plain white paper. So here's a 10 and a 12 side by side. 10's actually a little bit longer. The 12 is much finer. Let's see if I can get my thumb away. So you will find as you work that the 12 will bend on you. And
Mhm.
I actually find that once the needle is bent significantly, it's quite hard for me to thread the needle. And so I tend to discard those needles that get bent. And I simply use a little container. This is the one that's on my work table today, which is just an old pill bottle. And I put my broken or bent needles. There's a sewing needles in there. There's a machine sewing needle. There's some old pins. And when that's full, I throw it away. But I do want to put my needles, because I have animals around my house. I have a couple of very lovely dogs. I am careful with my needles and thread to dispose of them. I definitely want to make sure those are not on the ground where they might pick them up. So I do put them in that little sharps container and then throw them away when that gets full. But 10s and 12s, lovely to work with. And I'm going to show you a little something, and maybe you'll be able to see this because I can see it right now. Once in a great while, and this might just be wax in this needle, but I don't think it is. In the eye of this needle, there's a little something. Oh, it's just wax. So sometimes you'll find a needle that's hard to thread.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be, and that does happen from time to time, that your needle will come with a little bit of something stuck in it, the eye of the needle. And I've got my little pin cushion here, holding up a bunch of needles. I'm going to stick them in there. And I would love to show you how to thread a needle easily. So this is not my personal trick. I learned it many years ago from a magazine, Bead and Button magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Alice Korach taught it. It's also nice to have a good pair of super sharp snips to cut the thread with. The more evenly you cut your thread, the better off you'll be. I'm going to take that, get myself all set up here, and I'll bring it up nice and close. I'm going to take the thread, and I'm going to pull it down between my thumb and forefinger so that basically all you can see is a dot. How's that, Kate?
Yep, I
All right.
can see it.
All right. I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to take the eye of the needle and I'm going to press it down on top of that thread. And I'm going to do a little bit of a sawing back and forth motion. And with any luck, that thread will go right through the eye of the needle.
And it sure did.
And it did.
So we call that needling the thread.
Correct. Then I'm going to grab my beeswax and I'm going to run that thread across the beeswax. So that beeswax will eventually fall away and you'll probably have to re-wax your thread as you're working along. But it does keep the thread fibers together and really does a good job of help protecting that thread while you're working with it. And it's archival. We don't have to worry about that over years hurting that thread. Our threads are all nylon and polyester these days. Fireline does have some special considerations for it. When you cut fireline, it doesn't cut well with a regular scissor. It cuts much better, much more cleanly with a committed scissor. So these are the Xuron thread
Yeah,
snip.
the thread and cord snip scissors. Those are my favorite.
They do have one side has a little bit of a sawtooth edge, so it grips the thread nicely so it doesn't get away from you. It does a really good job. I often don't like to recommend tools that are super, super specific, but this is one that I think is really awesome. And it works super well for cutting threads nice and clean. Okay? So I would get that if you feel like you want to work with Fireline.
Let me ask you real quick then,
Sure.
Emily, about the fireline. Is there a way, like when you are tying knots at the end of threads, like let's say if you were using fireline to stitch or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, is there a special kind of knot that you would use with fireline, or what kind of knot would you use at the bottom of a thread?
This is going to be a controversial response to you, Kate.
Okay.
I usually don't tie knots in my bead weaving.
Right.
Almost never. So there are a few exceptions to that rule. I will tie a knot when I'm doing things like netting, when I'm doing the beaded berry chain, I will tie a knot. But I can do a whole piece like this, a whole bracelet like this, without a single knot. So the problem with knots is that as they move and as your piece is handled, your knots may move and clog up the whole of the bead. So that'll change how that tension is on that area and make it not move as well. You don't really need them. Also, you can weave your thread in enough times to have it hold. The beeswax helps a little bit with that also. And I always find, it's funny, I'm working on a project that's upcoming, which I don't have within arm's reach, so I can't flash it for you. But there's a project that I'm working on right now for October, I think, where I'm having to change my thread fairly often. And I'm constantly reminded that I never want to end my thread on an edge.
Right.
So if I end on an edge or I tie a knot, I'm never going to be able to get rid of that little tail of thread. So I'm kind of giving myself a bunch of breaks by avoiding knots, trying not to say knots too many times. Avoiding knots lets me have cleaner edges, places where thread doesn't poke out. It avoids me having a knot showing in between the beads or clogging up the hole of a bead. Even my loom woven pieces that I've made, my split loom that I started at the retreat has no knots in it. I don't need to have a knot.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm tying a knot, and let me see if I have within my arm's reach a cord of some pipe, and I unfortunately don't. I'm going to tie a simple, let's say I have a thread and I would like to tie another thread to it. I'm going to just loop around and tie a half hitch knot. And I might tie multiples of those. So move to another bead, another half hitch knot, through a few more beads, another half hitch knot. when I end off a thread in looming, brick, in peyote stitch, in any of those stitches, what I call burying the thread. And it's taken me a long time um, of learning by mistakes, because I think a lot of these technical issues were not something that was discussed when a lot of this stuff was being written up and printed. When I was learning how to do seed bead stitches, I would lose my way occasionally. I would be just clicking along, thinking I was doing the right thing, and suddenly things would look really weird. And I thought, oh, I have to undo all of this. So, one of the things I taught myself is that when I have to change a thread, let's just say I've gotten to the end of this row and I'm ready, my thread is very short and I need to change it. First off, I will actually change my thread before I absolutely need to.
Mm-hmm.
That if I'm leaning over trying to get my bead on the thread on the needle,
Right, and stressing that needle.
yeah, it's way too late. I
Yeah,
needed
it's too
to
late. Yeah, it's over.
Yeah. So what I'll do first when I'm about to change a thread is I'll actually let my old thread just hang out in the spot where it's living, wherever it ends. And I call this a 2-needle thread change, because we're going to have 2 active needles going at the same time for a minute or 2. So I'll let my old needle hang off the
Right.
side of my work, and then I will find a new needle, thread it up, and I will weave back and forth in the beadwork. And what I'm looking to do is about 3 to 4 direction changes. So if you want to think of it as a figure 8, I'm kind of moving around in the beadwork. So I'm passing through the beads again. And I didn't start on an edge, and I'm not going to finish on an edge either. So once I've secured that new thread, and I know it's secure because I can pull on it and it doesn't move, I'll work my way over and have my new thread come out the same bead as my old thread. And then I will continue to work. And I will work myself maybe 4, 5, 6 rows of thread, of beads, and then I'll stop. And I'll take my old thread and I'll weave it up into the new weaving, doing the same thing, that multiple direction changes. And then I will cut the thread under a little bit of tension somewhere at the top of the beadwork, not on an edge, always in the beadwork itself. And that will make sure that there's no pesky little tail kind of hanging out way after the project is over. I also want to say that I will also use a thread burner. And I know that you use these too.
Yeah.
Thread burners work really well. And really the glass bead is impervious to the thread burner. I can burn across the thread, across the beads. I would never want to put my thread burner in this way. That's a risky business right there.
Yeah, because you'll just burn right through your stitching.
And I might burn it if I'm on the edge as well. So
Yeah.
having that bead stop, that thread stop somewhere in the beadwork gives me lots of advantages. Okay. And that's all stuff that I would remind everybody when we do a project in any case, that when I have to do that thread, that needle change or thread change, I'm going to do it with 2 needles. So I've found over the years that what that does is it reminds me exactly where I need my new thread to be. It needs to come out side by side of that old thread, and then I can continue on. And then I can take that old thread and deal with it in just a minute or 2. So it takes a little bit of time to have those 2 threads kind of seemingly visually confusing to you maybe, but they really will protect you from having a mistake. Or
yeah, because I forget. Like sometimes I'll just go, oh, I'll just go ahead and weave it off and put my new needle in. And then if I'm distracted or I go somewhere and do something else and I come back and I'm like, what project is this? Almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What was this and what was I doing with it? Yeah. There are a couple of questions that the thread burner that you use is the one that we carry at Bead Shop, correct? Yeah, it's the perfect end. That's the one that we have tested so many thread burners over the years, and we are very pleased with this guy. It's not the cheapest one out on the market, but it is the one that we have tested. And you can see it just takes a battery. You still have that original battery in there.
That's because I got like 3 of these.
It looks like, right. Yeah, I have about 3 of them too.
I have
And
them
you
all
can
over.
really easily change out the tip because sometimes the tip goes bad, but the
Mhm.
burner is still fine.
This
Um,
is, and just FYI, now that we're getting back to traveling,
mhm.
this is one of the items that you cannot carry on the plane.
Mm-mm.
And in fact, they
Mm-mm.
actually might take it out of your suitcase.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're gonna take it, take the battery out, and I would pack it in your check-on luggage. Not try and carry it. This is the only tool over all the years of traveling with beads and tools and malarkey with me that I have had removed from my possession.
Yeah. I
So,
actually had a drill removed from my possession. And what I was doing, thinking I could get a drill on my carry-on. But I was like, it's a beading tool. They're like, no, you can actually drill a hole in the plane with that drill. And I went,
but
you can't.
I wouldn't.
But I'm like, I need it for this wire. So it's anyway,
So this tip gets
that's a
hot
long,
enough to brand you.
yeah,
It's very hot.
it's a cauterizing.
Yeah, and you could
Tool.
light something on fire with it. I
Yeah.
think the battery's dead in this one. So, um, yeah, and the cap is here to cover the button so it
So
doesn't
it doesn't,
accidentally get depressed. I also
yeah,
like that it's flat because it doesn't roll off the table. I
yeah.
think that's somebody thought that one through.
Yeah. And if you do have one and I actually had one where I had to really clean it because my battery leaked because I
Um,
left it
yeah,
like that. So
I should
so you
probably
can
fix
get
that.
we do carry the replacement tips. So if your perfect end went bad, it may be that you just need to replace
Yeah,
the
me too.
cauterizing tip. So,
I think I
so
have
it's good.
a couple of tips somewhere in preparation.
Yeah. And
Tip,
it's called The Perfect End, and you find it right on beadshop.com.
the end just comes right out.
Yeah, it comes right out and you push in a new one.
When they took mine away from me, I went through the various stages of grieving, and I said, "Can I take the battery out and just take the battery, just have it without the battery?" And the very nice TSA lady said, "No."
No.
And I said, "Well, how about if I take the tip because that doesn't by itself?" And she's, "That's fine. You can have that end." So I kept that, and then I lost the rest of it. But
Ugh.
I'd flown maybe 10 times already with it, and then I finally
Yeah.
busted coming home from Milwaukee. Ugh.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I got the drill back to the desk agent and she held it for me for a week.
Wow.
I know. Thank you, SFO, Alaska Airlines from about 8 years ago, going to Beat and Button with a drill in my carry-on. Yeah, I only made our buddy Lisa Niven Kelly at Beaducation will never let me live that down, um, ever, ever. But anyway, there's another question here. Let me go back. People are loving the old pieces you showed.
Oh, good.
Um,
Yeah, they're super pretty. I mean,
great. Yeah.
I, you know, I don't think I've spent very much money on any of these, and I'm so pleased that I sort of saved them from the landfill or just being dumped. Uh, it just,
Yeah, just being cut up or thrown away or
yeah,
whatever.
they just make me real happy.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
no, it's great. And so I wanted to mention some of you guys have jumped in kind of midway during this broadcast. You can always find and rewatch these broadcasts. Best place to do it is over on our YouTube channel. You'll see this on the Free Tip Friday playlist over there. And this is a great one to go ahead and bookmark and add to your collection if you have a YouTube account. You can, add it to a playlist. You can make your own beadshop.com playlist to keep on your, on your YouTube profile. Also, you can find all of Emily's resources under our Seed Bead School over on beadshop.com. Those are some nice pieces, Em. That earring we've done, but that earring that you had that was a precursor of maybe that lantern earring.
I think so. There was, yeah,
Will
I,
you pull those a little closer to the camera so we can have a little yeah, look at that. Fun.
yeah. So it's, I love primaries and opaques, and again, working with just a couple colors, you can really do some really pretty things with stripes and dots and that kind of thing. Even this one is just two colors, you know. Next time we'll talk about more about shaped beads and
Mhm.
the other beads that you can intermingle with seed beads. But there's
Yeah,
definitely
we'll talk about bugles and cubes and stuff like
yeah,
that. That would be
absolutely.
great.
Um, I had one more here that I was so I yesterday I was having so much fun looking kind of through my
Oh, that oldie but goodie
yeah,
with the teardrop bauble chain at the bottom. Gosh,
yeah,
I love that. That Missoni
me
kind
too.
of
Yeah,
earring
yeah.
fade.
Not a single knot in all of that, Kate.
No. Oh, no surprise there.
I
Well,
have,
people
you know
are
what?
saying,
I have one more thing to say
"Oh,
about
great."
seed bead stuff. And
Mhm.
this is one of those things where every time I write a direction, I put it at the beginning and I think, God, does anybody need to know about that? And I think you do need to know about this. But I just wanted to explain one thing. And I'm going to put actually, I want to explain two things. I want to put one bead on here. I'm going to use this bead as a stopper bead.
Mhm.
So to make a stopper bead, I'm going to pull it down past the point where the threads are overlapping. And I'm going to go through it again in the same direction. So the thread is on the outside. Come on, work with me here, fingers. The thread is on the outside of the bead,
Mhm.
right? Let me see that,
Yep, it's just wrapped around there.
right? So the stopper bead is just there to keep your other beads on the thread. It has no purpose. It has no count. It's not involved in any patterning, really. I'm going to take the stopper bead off by just sliding the thread off.
Mhm.
Let me put it back on again because sometimes I need to tension my thread, my beads, my first row or two of beads. And I can actually slide that stopper bead up and down the thread at will, much as I
Right.
want, right? So that's one kind of constant that I use in my work. Let me show you one other
Little tip there.
little tip here. I know we were talking about making you the best beater you can be. When I work, I typically work on some sort of a flocked surface. So a surface that has a little bit of texture to help keep the beads in place. And I'm going to tip out a little volcano of beads. So if I had multiple colors, I would have boom, 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 all the way along here, multiple colors of beads that I needed to work with, right? And to get the beads on my needle, this is one of those things when people will admire your work and they'll say, God, the beads are so small. I'm actually going to close my eyes. You have to trust me that my eyes are closed.
Yes.
And I'm going to scoop my needle through the beads. So I just picked up a bunch of beads. I'm opening up again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. I needed 10 beads. There's my 10 beads. So
Didn't take long.
didn't take long, and I didn't actually have to watch what I was doing. Now, before I take my next stitch, I'm going to actually look at these beads. And I want to bring it up real close because with my eyesight, I can see it, but you guys can't quite see this yet. There is an irregular bead in here that would not pass muster for me.
Mm.
So it looks
It's
like
that third one in. Is it the
it
third
is.
one?
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
can see it.
So
I know Emily's criteria for
I
a
would
seed
actually
bead.
take the other beads off and get rid of bead number 3.
Yeah, you would.
Actually, it's not the bead number 3, it's bead number 4. It's
Oh,
that
okay.
guy right there.
Oh, there it is.
So to do that, I'm just going to pinch these beads
Right.
and I'm going to slide him off. And you know what I do nowadays is I just put him in a triangle. And then I'm going to slide my needle back through those beads because I had to do some effort to pick them up. And now my beads are back.
Yeah.
right? And I look at my bead before I stitch it. So before I take another move with my needle, I'm going to actually just take a moment to glance at these beads to make sure they are as perfect as I can come up with. There's no wide ones, there's no skinny ones. They're even. I will not discard, but I will edit out the ones that are irregular. And the
Yeah.
irregular ones are going to be set aside for fringe.
Oh, that's
So
smart because fringe, it doesn't matter really.
it really doesn't matter quite as much. And
No.
even the some of the most irregular ones wouldn't make it to fringe. But once I've got them on my needle and I'm okay with them, then I'm ready to stitch to make my
Yeah.
next stitch. Right?
And the beads, when you have them on the needle and you're looking at them, that's really the only configuration where you can really see them side by side,
Yep.
right? I mean,
Yep.
that's how it is. And so see how Emily's just going through, it's that volcano that she's made that allows her to pick up those seed beads so quick. I have not mastered the volcano as much as I should or use it as much as I should.
The
It's
other
really
alternative
fast.
way to do this is to look at the beads. And can you zoom in on my camera or do I have to
I
zoom in?
can't. No, you have to do it.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm not sure I can do it.
Yeah, that's okay. Just bring it up close.
Okay. Let me pick up this whole tray.
Or whatever.
Yeah. So my alternate way of picking up beads is to look at them as hole up. And I'm going
Right.
to push down on the hole and the bead's going to hop on the needle.
That's how I do it.
So if I just need one bead, I might do it this way. But I got to tell you, the volcano method is my favorite,
Yeah, is your
right? My
way of
go-to,
doing it. Because look at how fast those jump on the needle.
right? So
Those are a nice color.
any size, any mixture will work just fine,
Mhm.
right?
It's nice. Great. I think I'm just going to look real quick and see if there are any other quick questions. People, Emily, are really bowled over by how much information was in this presentation, as am I. I love
Triangle
it.
shapes are also your best friend.
Yeah, we love those triangles. We're going to put on the list of pieces to make. That bracelet. Everyone just loved that bracelet that had the beads.
This
Um,
pink one?
no, not that one. The one from your jar.
Oh, the peyote pathway.
Yeah, with the picot.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good one.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm going to go ahead and put you and I on the screen here. Let me move this around a little bit. There we go. And let me take that out. So it's you and me. There we go. I wanted to also mention, I've got a few books. The rest of my Seed Bead books are in the house, but this is one, Emily, that you gave me, I think.
Oh, yes. From Robin
Right?
Atkins. Yes.
Robin Atkins. She is an old school seed beater. You may be able to find this used.
She's still selling her books, still
Is
living in
she?
Credit Harbor. Yep.
Yeah. She talks a lot about seed bead work. She is an old school seed beater
Yeah.
beater from way back. This is a great book and it talks about a lot of different technique, but I wanted to show you, I should have marked it, but these kind of old school kind of bracelets. I don't know. I can't really get the photo in there. It's
I have one of those from her.
right. One of those guys there.
Yep.
So this is a fun one. Again, this is Beaded Treasures by, there we go, by Robin Atkins.
Oh, I love Robin. She's
Yeah.
great.
She's a great teacher.
Yep.
Really great. So there's a lot of fun, like we'll get the seed bead books out. I've got a few that you've given me and a few. Yeah, Emily, there's a big, people are going to rewatch this. There's an Emily, thank you from Barbara. That was great. So thank you, Em, so much for
you're welcome.
all of that knowledge that you've thrown down.
It's all part one.
It is. You can tell all of those, all of those years of making. I just wanted to mention all of you that you can find us on all of our social media, great places to follow us over at beadshop.com. Of course, our bead shop group called the Bead Table. And like, subscribe, make those playlists, share those playlists over on our YouTube channel at beadshop.com. And of course, you can shop everything over at our website on beadshop.com. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for all the latest info. We put all of this free learning out here. You guys had a master class with a master seed beater today. So we really, really appreciate your support of our small business, because without you guys out there, we wouldn't be able to do what we love right here. We've got some great projects coming up with Emily soon. We've got an Egyptian spiral bracelet that I know you guys are going to love. We have a lot of wire coming up, so I think you guys are gonna love the wire. So lots of thanks, Em. Lots of fun. People are going to rewatch and take notes.
I'm going to have to go back and look at all the comments because I forgot to bring my iPad up here with me.
Yeah. So. Well, people are really, really grateful for it. So
no other third screen.
You can find it also, Emily. They can follow you right on your Instagram. Emily B. Miller Jewelry, is it?
Yep. And I will start posting up there too when I'm going to be on the internets.
Yes, on with me.
Not that step yet, but I will. So
yeah, we'll get there because we've got you scheduled through. So you'll see Emily in just a week or 2 weeks or something soon.
Let me look over there at the calendar. Hold on.
I should have the calendar up, but I don't.
Gosh, now I have to lean over. Hold on.
Let me see. I may have it here somewhere.
Oh, it's next Wednesday.
Oh, perfect. Good to know. Good to know. I look at my calendar.
It's long.
That's right. So we'll be back next Wednesday, you and me, for some wire. And then I'll be back on a Free Tip Friday. I still have this, our big piece that we're going to finish on a Friday. So again, thank you guys for watching. Emily, thank you for throwing down all of this. Was super fun. And Emily and I will see you on Wednesday then for more wire.
4 days.
Thanks, everybody. 4 days. Yeah, just have a great weekend, everyone.
And we'll talk to you soon.